Thank you, Dr. Staudinger, and I'll echo those same thoughts and appreciation for everybody coming today. Thank you for being here. I would like to now introduce our student doctor, Stephanie Bates. She has been a pleasure to work with. So let me pull up my formal introduction here. Sorry, I'm in between multitasking. Okay, so Stephanie came to KCU with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and a post-baccalaureate schooling in pre-medicine from the School of General Studies at Columbia University in New York, as well as an associate degree in accounting from Bergen Community College in New Jersey. She has vast experience in money management, having worked at a savings bank for 14 years. Since joining KCU, Stephanie has been part of several committees, including Student Ambassador, Wellness, Diversity, and Community Engagement Committee, and Student Government Association. She has honors from the Gold Humanism Honor Society and has presented on hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis syndrome. I'm sorry, Stephanie, I probably butchered that, at the Lee Physicians Group quarterly meeting. During the pandemic, Stephanie has worked as a seamstress producing masks for donation and worked with a group of third-year student doctors to produce the all-inclusive COVID-19 resource document found on our Canvas site. And just as a reminder, if everybody could please mute their mics and raise their hands with any questions, I will turn it over to you. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you, Shelley. Just sharing my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, so thank you for the introduction. I just want to welcome everyone and thank everyone for being here. Our topic today is the socioeconomic disparities of COVID-19. You can find more articles for this topic in the COVID-19 research resource document that's on Canvas. I encourage you to check it out. There's also many other different subtopics of COVID-19 there. So our first article that we're going to cover is the American Indian Reservations and COVID-19 Correlates of Early Infection Rates in the Pandemic. This article was published in the Journal of Public Health Management and Practice in July and August issue of this year. I came across this article while searching for research papers about the impact of COVID-19 on Native American communities. Just for a little background, there are 574 federally recognized tribal nations. A majority of them live on 326 Native American reservations that encompass close to 50 million acres of land in the United States. Tribal nations are sovereign nations within the territory of the United States. They maintain direct government-to-government relationships and hold their own public health authority, the same as independent states, counties, and territories do here in America. Although they have had many successes managing their own health, a lot of challenges remain, such as funding and infrastructure. So these are our authors. There's 4 of them. These are their affiliations. They come from mostly the Southwest, University of Arizona, UCLA, and David Geffen School of Medicine. A little bit more context about Native American health. These statistics are, I believe, from 2015. I got these from the Health and Human Services government website. So what we see here is that Native American life expectancy at birth is 77.5 years as compared to non-Hispanic whites, which is 79.8, approximately 80 years. For Native American women, their life expectancy is also lower at 80.3 years, while for non-Hispanic whites, women is 82 years, and for men, the life expectancy for Native American men is 74.7 years, while for non-Hispanic whites is also 77.5 years. The leading causes of death for Native Americans are heart disease, cancer, unintentional injuries, diabetes, and stroke. There's also a higher prevalence for mental health and suicide, substance abuse, sudden infant death syndrome, teenage pregnancy. And this was an interesting stat. In 2017, the incidence of TB was 4 times higher for Native Americans as compared to the white population of the United States. Something to note is that these statistics include the indigenous people of Alaska, whereas this article we're going to cover only includes analysis of Native American communities within the lower 48 states. So our researchers set out to determine what kind of community characteristics were most closely associated with COVID-19 incidents on American Indian reservations. And this study is important because it examines the associations of characteristics that aren't explicitly health-related. Of particular concern that we're going to look at are the lack of household plumbing, the percentage of households that speak English only within a Native American reservation, and also how many households have overcrowding. So our authors used a regression analysis to look at these 3 independent variables and how they affect the outcome variable, which is the rate of COVID-19 cases per 1,000 people on Native American reservations. They drew upon empirical and anecdotal evidence to hypothesize that these 3 variables should have a relationship to the rate of COVID cases. Lack of plumbing was defined as missing any or all of the following: flushing toilets, hot and cold water, and a tub or shower. They got the information about these 3 characteristics from a 2018 5-year American Community Survey. The COVID-19 incidents came from a publication called Indian Country Today, which has been compiling this information. So this graph shows the summary of the populations in aggregate. So they looked at U.S. reservations, so a total of 287, and then it compared it to the United States as a whole. So what they found is that the percentage of households with overcrowding, which is defined as greater than 1 person per room, is 6.91% for Native American reservations as compared to 3.4% for the United States as a whole. This red box shows the percent of households that speak English only. And this statistic was a little surprising because we see that 82.82% of households on the U.S. reservations as a whole speak English only, compared to 78% of the United States. And the interesting thing here that the article noted, however, is that there's a wide range from reservation to reservation. So some reservations had as low as a 7% English speaking only portion of their community, and then some had as much as 100%. And also to keep in mind is that the size of Native American reservations vary greatly as well. So I'm not sure if these percentages were weighted to take into account the different sizes of the reservations. Our third variable we're going to look at is the percent of homes without indoor plumbing. This showed that 1.09% of homes on Native American reservations do not have indoor plumbing as compared to 0.4% in the United States. The article noted that the group next most likely to lack indoor plumbing are African American households in the United States. So what do we expect out of these variables? We expect that the percentage of homes lacking indoor plumbing will be positively correlated with the rate of COVID-19 cases on a reservation, because sanitation and access to running water are important determinants of disease transmission. We expect that the percentage of homes with overcrowding will be positively correlated to COVID-19 incidence, because there will be less of an opportunity to self-quarantine in crowded conditions. We also expect that percentage of households that speak English only will be negatively correlated to COVID-19 incidence, due to the expectation that most public health messages and directives will be provided primarily in English. They did control for many factors in their analysis, such as percentage of households on the reservation that are occupied by Native Americans, because there are non-natives living on reservations. Also, they controlled for which state the majority of the reservation was located on, since we all know that different states responded differently to the pandemic. They also controlled for average household size, median household age, percentage of the population that is male, median household income, percentage of households that are married, and the percentage of the population with a bachelor's degree or higher. So these were our results. In the first green box, you see that there is a statistically significant positive correlation between the percentage of homes lacking plumbing facilities. And then in the red box, we see that there is a statistically significant negative correlation between the percentage of households speaking English only. So those are in line with the hypotheses of the authors. The yellow circle shows that there's a negative correlation with overcrowding and COVID-19 incidence, which is not what was expected, but it also was not statistically significant.
This is Dr. Johnson. I just wanted to ask you a question, and thank you very much. That's what it was. Can you enlarge those slides? Because if we don't have the article in front of us, just can't hardly see it. So I would appreciate it if you could enlarge it. Thank you.
Dr. Johnston, if you, there's a little pop-out button at the bottom right of the actual slide. And if you pop it out, you can put it up on your screen in a full screen, and that helps quite a bit.
Hold down here.
Yeah, you have to move your mouse to the bottom right of the slide itself.
I got it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So what they found was that there is a strong association with the lack of indoor plumbing. That was the most statistically significant correlation coefficient out of the regression analysis. It's important to discuss here that some reservation communities have elected not to pursue full plumbing facilities for historical, cultural, environmental reasons. So the lack of indoor plumbing is a complicated issue. However, there are solutions that can be considered, such as potable water and the dissemination of hand sanitizer. The negative, we found that English-only household was negatively correlated with COVID-19 incidence. So possible solutions that could be explored would be public health campaigns in indigenous languages, and also illustrative public health campaigns about hand washing and social distancing and such. We found no relationship in household overcrowding, which was unexpected. However, it wasn't statistically significant, and more research should be done in this area. Some limitations of this study were that it was a small sample size. The vast differences between reservations are very great, so to lump them all together is a limitation. And also the household characteristics that we used were a little stale. They were from a 2018 survey. And now we will open it up to discussion.
Stephanie, it's Dr.
Student
Johnson.
doctor.
Just a couple questions.
Okay.
The fact that the overcrowding in the homes wasn't associated with this, that's just kind of contrary to everything we've heard about this virus relevant to the social distancing and et cetera. So what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that the study was done early on in the pandemic, so the stats could be a little wonky just because of that. Also, that sometimes again, the vast differences of Native American reservations. So some of them are very self-isolated and some of them are not. Some of them have people moving in and out of the reservation and going into the general community, and some of them don't. So I think differences like that can create some discrepancies in the data.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yuna, go ahead with your question.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Steph, I actually had the same question as Dr. Johnston, but I was wondering, it kind of occurs to me that the fact that the English speaking was, the lack of English speaking was positively correlated with an increase in infection rate. Do you think that could have affected the overcrowding situation at all? Because if there was no information that you were supposed to quarantine people, then I don't know. I guess I could see the two things affecting each other.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly like how they did their regression analyses, but in traditional regressions, you should test the interplay between the variables against each other. So I'm not sure if that's what they did, but typically that's how these analyses work. So I think they would have taken in consideration how the three variables play on to each other as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Schneira, I see your hand is raised. Go ahead with your question, please.
Definitely not actually a question, but just comments. Very mature presentation. You formulated hypotheses of these researchers. You highlighted the way how they determine and achieve their goals, objectives. Very mature presentation. I just comment on it. Are you? Thank you.
Thank you.
Student Dr. Matt, could you please go ahead with your question?
Sure. Thanks for the presentation, Stephanie. It was really interesting. I did have a question. If in the article they looked into the average age in the household, since it seems in a lot of studies that younger age is more protective against COVID-19 and you're more at risk for if you're at an older age. I don't know if they looked into that at all, which could kind of contribute to the overcrowding. If you have a household that's a lot younger, there might be an effect.
Yeah, I agree. There is, they just commented on the median ages of as you can see here, as like the general population's characteristics, but they didn't use it, and I don't believe, oh, well, actually they controlled for it.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I forgot I mentioned that. They did control for the median age in the regression analysis. So it was taken into account. I'm not sure how it affected the results.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Wolf, go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah, Stephanie, my question was along the same lines as Matt's question, but it had to do also with how much money was in the household. I mean, to some extent, for some of these houses, it costs to leave home, and to the extent that they're dependent on casino profits or things like that for their income, they may not actually be getting out.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my notes about the controls. But I do believe the median income was also controlled for, and also certain other social factors that play into general health of the community, such as like whether they had a bachelor's degree or higher. So I think in certain ways they tried to eliminate the noise from things like income, age, and just poverty level.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Schneider, go ahead.
I just would like to make a comment, not question. If this study is statistical, everything was randomized, right? So it has to be within comparable levels. So if we discuss it, income, age, etc., otherwise you're not permitted to do this comparison. Just as a comment.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, Stephanie, you can go on to your next article, please.
Okay, thank you. So our next article title is Clinical Characteristics and Morbidity Associated with the Coronavirus Disease in a Series of Patients in Metropolitan Detroit. This was published in the JAMA Network Open Infectious Diseases edition on June 16th, 2020. I came across this article while searching for research papers about the impact of COVID-19 on the African American community. A little background for the state of Michigan. On March 10th, 2020, the state of Michigan confirmed its first 2 cases of COVID. Since then, to the time of this publication, the case number was 49,582 with a 10% death rate, totaling 4,787, which was the highest case fatality rate in the nation. Metropolitan Detroit was the epicenter of the outbreak, accounting for 80% of the state's cases and 86% of the deaths in that state. The city of Detroit alone accounted for almost 1/3 of all the confirmed cases and deaths. This study is important because COVID-19 has disproportionately affected the African American population in Michigan and in other parts of the country. They have had high rates of comorbid conditions and obesity. As of May 14th, African American patients accounted for 32% of cases and 41% of deaths, despite composing only 14% of the state's population. This is in line with what we're seeing in other parts of the country. For instance, in Louisiana, African American residents make up 32% of the state population, but accounted for more than 56% of the COVID-19 deaths as of May 14th, 2020. These are all the authors that contributed to this study. These are their affiliations. They mostly work at Henry Ford Hospital System in Detroit, Michigan, Department of Infectious Diseases, Internal Medicine, the School of Medicine and Wayne State University, and the Department of Emergency Medicine at Henry Ford Hospital.
Stephanie, we're not seeing your screen. At least I'm not.
Actually, we are. At least I am.
I am also seeing it. This is Dr. Biddle.
I'm seeing it too.
The screen.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Dr. Wolf. Okay. So a little background information that I retrieved from the CDC. This information is a little stale as well. It's from 2015, but it's the most up to date on the CDC. This graph shows that African American communities are more likely to have high blood pressure, diabetes, and stroke in all age categories. It's also important to note that in this graph, whites include Hispanic and non-Hispanic whites. This graph shows some social factors and other health risks that can affect a person, and it also shows that in African American communities, folks are more likely to be unemployed, living in poverty, have limited access to doctors, more likely to smoke in older age groups, less likely to exercise, and more likely to be obese. This data is from 2015 and 2014, so it's a little old as well. To extrapolate something from this graph into Michigan, where this article is going to focus, in Michigan, 27% of African American residents were in poverty compared to 11% of whites in the year of 2019. So these are...
This is Dr. Schneider. Can you move back? So
yeah.
On Y ordinate, it is a percentage of general population. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
So our objectives, the researchers sought to answer the question, what are the clinical characteristics and outcomes of patients with coronavirus disease evaluated within the Henry Ford Health System in Southeast Michigan during the early phase of the outbreak? So this is a case series. It's going to report correlations, not causation. They extrapolated the information from the EHR of the Henry Ford Health System. The information that they collected included demographic data, underlying comorbidities, symptoms and signs of presentation, complications, treatment, and outcomes. Background about this health system. It's a comprehensive integrated organization that includes 5 hospitals and 9 emergency rooms in Southeast Michigan. Their flagship hospital is 877 beds in Detroit proper. All the patients tested positive for SARS-CoV-2 and by PCR, and 477 of these patients tested positive out of 1,459 patients. And so that was a 32.7% positive rate. So what did they discover about the patients? So these were the demographics of the patient population that tested positive for COVID-19 during this time period. The first green box shows that 47% of overall cases were over the age of 60, and then close to 57% of the hospital admissions were over the age of 60. This is a statistically significant difference between those hospitalized and those discharged within this cohort of being over 60 years old. In the pink box, we see something that's different from prior reports that have been released, which shows a majority of females coming to the hospital, testing positive for COVID-19, and also females being more likely to be hospitalized. Slightly not as strongly statistically significant, but. And then the second green box down here, which was an interesting statistic, that 81 of the positive patients had come to the emergency department within the past 7 days, and all of those folks were subsequently admitted to the hospital. Something to note is that the African American race alone was not statistically significant to make you more likely to be hospitalized. And 72% of all of the patients that tested positive were of African American race. But this could just reflect the population that this hospital system serves. So this next graph shows the symptoms at presentation. In the green boxes are the symptoms that have been commonly associated with COVID-19. The most popular symptoms were cough, dyspnea, fever. And the interesting part of this graph in the red boxes are anorexia and diarrhea. These are GI symptoms. They were present in close to 22% of the positive patients, and they are statistically significant for those hospitalized compared to those discharged. They were present in close to 25% of those patients that were eventually hospitalized. So this graph shows comorbidities of the patient population. It is important to mention that 435 out of the 463 positive patients had at least one comorbidity. That's 94%. The mean number of comorbidities for the hospitalized cohort is 3.2 versus 1.9 for the discharge cohort, and that is a statistically significant difference. In the green boxes, you'll see diabetes, hypertension, chronic kidney disease, and body mass index. All of these differences were statistically significant between the hospital cohort and the discharge cohort. The mean BMI of hospitalized patients was 33.6, and 26% of severely obese patients were required ICU. To be considered severely obese, that's a BMI of greater than or equal to 40. And a BMI over 30 is considered obese class 1. So just a little what they found on vitals and imaging. These statistics are in line with what you would expect. So if you had a lower oxygen saturation, you were more likely to be hospitalized, and that's statistically significant. Also, if you had bilateral infiltrates on radiographs in your lungs, that was more likely to make you be admitted to the hospital. So both of those things, work together, and is what we have seen in other studies that have been released. So the labs at presentation, we saw elevated AST and cardiac troponin I levels in positive COVID patients, and the higher the level, the more likely they were to be hospitalized, and those are statistically significant differences between hospital and discharge cohorts. So now these patients are in the hospital. What happened to them during their hospital stay? So compared to previous reports, a larger proportion of the hospitalized patients in this hospital system required ICU admission. 39.7%, which is 141 out of that, compared with 14% in New York City, 24% across the US, and up to 20% in China. So the rate of ICU care was higher here. The researchers adjusted for significant factors and race and found that male sex, severe obesity, and chronic kidney disease remained significantly associated with the need for ICU care. Those requiring ICU level care were more likely than patients in the general wards to be older than 60 years old, male, and have comorbidities such as severe obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and chronic kidney disease. So how many ICU patients required invasive mechanical ventilation? So 104 patients out of the 141 in the ICU developed acute respiratory distress. 114 out of the 141 required invasive mechanical ventilation. The researchers did analysis to calculate the odds ratios for certain characteristics. So male sex had a statistically significant odds ratio of 2.9. Also, you can see if the patient was older than 60 years old, severely obese, had chronic kidney disease, or cancer, those were all independently associated with the need for invasive mechanical ventilation. There were 35 patients admitted who were younger than 40 years old, 8 of whom required invasive mechanical ventilation, and then 5 of those had severe obesity. And I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but today or yesterday, the CDC expanded their guidance. So obesity in younger populations is an increased risk factor for COVID-19 complications. So what we see here, I should have highlighted, African-American race was not associated with ICU admission or invasive mechanical ventilation. So the conclusions, just to recap, the researchers found strong association with the need for ICU care for male sex, severe obesity, and chronic kidney disease, a strong association with the need for invasive mechanical ventilation, male sex, age over 60, severe obesity, chronic kidney disease, and cancer. They found no statistically significant association with race, whether it's hospitalization, ICU care, or the need for invasive mechanical ventilation. So the article considers some factors that affect African American communities more so than other communities, such as lower wage positions, employment in industries that involve more close contact with people, poverty, lack of access to personal vehicles, so they have to take public transportation more often, and crowded housing situations. So now we will open up to discussion.
Go ahead, Dr. Johnston.
Okay, Stephanie, thank you very much. I enjoyed that. There was a whole bunch of commonalities, I think, that are well accepted in terms of morbidities associated with this disease, vulnerability, I should say. What do you think is the cause that's driving up the troponin I? Typically, that's noted in cardiac disorders, heart attacks, etc. But the heart wasn't mentioned in any of the complications of this article. So I wonder where the troponin I is coming from. What are your thoughts there?
That's a good question. When I looked at these, I didn't really look too much farther in other papers. My novice opinion would be just tissue damage from the inflammation. So similar to the AST levels being elevated, it's just a reaction to the inflammation causing tissue damage, but I'm not really sure.
And I think you may be exactly right. That might be just an inflammatory, non-specific enzyme that's reacting to the process. I think that's a good point. The other thing would be whether or not there's any, and I don't know this for a fact, but any delayed clearance in the subpopulation of people that have elevated for abnormal kidney function, whether
Yeah.
or not it's a clearance issue. But I think you're probably right. It's an inflammatory response. And you'd think if the troponins are starting to go up, you'd think that there's some cardiac complication heading our way, but apparently not. I thought your summation of the article was very well put. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Schneider, go ahead with your question or comment, please. Dr. Schneider, if you're on mute, I don't think we can hear you.
Right. Thank you so much. Because I was muted, maybe I'm talking too much by moderator. All right, so I start with the commenting again on your up-to-date knowledge, because indeed, it's yesterday CDC released new extended correlations, etc., and you commented on that. That is very nice. Now, relatively, again, it's comments only about obesity. All right, so that's probably the major characteristic as that CDC came up with, and that is why it correlates with the diabetes, and diabetes type 2, not type 1. There's no correlation with type 1, right? So because that's usually people are lean. All right, so talking about correlation with chronic kidney disease, majority of them on anti-inflammatory regimes, right? So that is probably open a gate of opportunity for infection to make those people more susceptible. That is just as a comment, right? So helping you to figure out it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for student Dr. Stephanie Bates? Yes, Dr. Wolf, go ahead.
Yeah, Stephanie, I was going to ask you if you were familiar with the guy. I was just looking him up here, Josh Ketter, that was at Amazon or someplace like that. But he put out some things that's on the medium.com, so Ketter. And so among the things that he's arguing that is music to the ears of my relatives, for example, that don't want to believe that COVID-19 is particularly dangerous. So the thing that they're talking about is the notion that people are dying with it rather than from it, and that it's really got a very low direct effect on the death rate itself. And that for many people, you can go out there and live your life just normal, and you're hardly at all impacting your risk of death. And so it's a fairly complete article, and he makes some things, or there's two of them actually, but he makes some comments that I think have some serious validity to them. But the scary thing from my perspective is that it seems to be, as I said, music to the ears of people that don't want to take this whole problem seriously.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments, or thoughts on this topic?
I don't know about the topic per se, but I can say, Stephanie, you got the right mindset to want to pursue internal medicine. I think you're on the right track.
Thank you very much.
Well, Stephanie, thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation. If everybody could unmute their mics and show themselves and give Stephanie a round of applause. Thank you so much for this COVID-19 presentation. Some announcements, flash reminders to everybody. Next week is a holiday. We do have the 4th of July on Saturday, so Friday, there are no journal clubs. We are actually on paid holiday for people that forget, because I know I forget what day of the week it is. We're off on Friday. And there's no seminar next week. So Thursday's seminar series is not happening and Friday's journal club will not be happening, but we will pick those things back up the following week with Dr. Talley. She will be presenting in the seminar series, and Yuman will be our student doctor that will be presenting. So please, everybody come back next week. There will be announcements. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Schneider.
Okay, now I'm muted. Thank you. Somebody unmutes me all the time.
I was gonna let you know the mics, if they're left on during presentation, we will mute them and then unmute during discussion. So that's just simply a moderator option that if mics are left unmuted. So my apologies for that.
All right, so I'm not retarded and slow reacting. All right, so question for you: who selects and suggests publications for the journal club?
To suggest a publication or for presentation, either one of those, please reach out to me or Dr. Staudinger, and we will be happy to, get you on the schedule or try to coordinate something.
No,
so,
I'm asking about students will be delivered. They train for that. That's one of the purpose of this club. All right. So who suggests topics for students' presentation?
Students do.
Okay. Entirely. Yes. Can we direct them in one way or another? Because it seems around that we are all about epidemiology. At least the meetings I am attending, it's all about epidemiology, right? So rather we need to change a little bit and move forward for pharmacology, for mechanistics, right? So this disease, that's probably topics that should be expanded in that direction. It's just my suggestion.
Yeah, Dr. Schneider, thank you for that suggestion. And if you go to the MKRC Canvas site, where we actually provide the articles for you to peruse before, and they're sent out as an announcement, you'll see the COVID-19 resource document, and there are numerous aspects of COVID-19 that are going to be covered in this seminar series. And it does just happen that you've chosen to attend the epidemiologically oriented one. So molecular biology of COVID is coming, and numerous areas of COVID biology are in the coming future.
All right, thank you.
I'll just add on that too, Dr. Schneider. This summer is a COVID-19 sort of focus, but we will hopefully, if students want to continue this, we will broaden the topics out and expand to discuss on anything that they want to for this journal club to continue into the fall semester and the spring to come, as long as students have the interest and want to participate.
Shelley, that wasn't my intent to change the topic. It's still changing topic. It's fascinating in terms of from scientific standpoint, how everything is changing the more we know about it. No, I'm not about to change it and switch something. We need to up to date. And that is why I'm attending in particular this meeting, because that is very important. Stephanie, it was very great to hear, very mature, also professional presentation. And just again to reiterate what I was said before.
Thank you. Thank you for those words to her. I know Stephanie appreciates it. And thank you for your feedback as well. Everybody, please continue to tune in because COVID-19 is going to continue to be the topic, and the discussions, I think, are very relevant for this time and for all of us right now. You can find the papers, the journals that they're going to be discussing will be available on the Canvas site prior to the Friday Journal Club, and they also come out in the announcements as PDF links as well. So if you want access to those journals, you can get them beforehand too. And is there any other thoughts, questions, concerns before we go? If not, I will say everybody have a nice weekend and break next week. And I look forward to seeing everyone back the following week.